Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today. My name is Tileba Lawson. Today we're going to have a presentation with CloudBees and VMware. We're just going to sit tight, have a nice day, and the person who's going to present is Brian Nash. He's going to start. Then from VMware we have Shao, and Brian, there you go.
Great, thanks, Taleva. Welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate having you here. I'm Brian, and I'll be introducing Zhao in a minute as we get to his portion of the slides. I also like to thank our host, Chris, who set this up, and thank David from my team who is here from our CloudBees team as a technical resource to make sure we get all of your questions answered. Between he and Zhao, I'm sure we can send you away with all the information you need to get started. And that's our goal today, is to really enable you and help you make your business more competitive by making your software development more competitive. And that's really what we're talking about today. We're talking about how to make our software process more state-of-the-art. But what that really means is we're talking about how to make our business more competitive and more take more advantage of software as a critical asset. Whether we like it or not, software has become a component of every business, and not just a cost center, not just a necessary evil, but actually an opportunity to really create competitive advantage. Most consumers pick their bank because of the mobile app. Insurance companies are able to remain competitive with their rates because they have automated claims processing. Manufacturing companies use software. Healthcare companies use software. There's 100 million lines of code in the average new car. Software is important for all of our businesses, and it's how we can get ahead. It's how we can win in our own markets. And so we need to treat our software as a critical business asset that we manage with care and that we very carefully pay attention to, that we measure, that we nurture, right? And we have all these expensive software developers, and we need to make sure that we are using them to their best advantage and we're really maximizing their creativity. Because if we're not, then we're wasting all that energy and all that cost, right? So what we don't want to do is have our expensive, brilliant software developers sitting around building tools to help them do their job. We want them to be building something that helps us compete. We don't want these ideas to get stuck in the process. We don't want bottlenecks where things don't get released. We don't want developers spending time fixing a server under their desk when they should be building something of value. And so it's about enabling them, but it's also about protecting this asset and protecting our business, right? We are creating all of this valuable intellectual property in software. This might be the thing that makes us competitive. This might be the way our company wins. We have to keep that close to the vest. We have to protect our source code. And like it or not, a lot of us are in industries where governance and compliance are regulated and required. And even if they aren't, there are good security practices and good corporate governance practices that are the state of reality for all of us. And if we aren't treating our software with that same rigor, then we're exposing ourselves to a lot of risk. So a lot of organizations are being faced with this mixed set of challenges. I want my developers to have the freedom to run, to think, to innovate. I want to unplug them from tedious work and put them against the most interesting problems our business has to solve, in the hope that software can become a really important advantage for us as a company. But I also need to balance that their productivity and their creativity cannot come at the expense of protecting our IP, cannot come at the expense of ensuring compliance with the regulations, with our corporate policies, with our security guidelines. So how do we do both of those things? That they could be opposed if they weren't handled carefully. Well, the way that most of us have tried to solve this problem is with automation and orchestration of the software process. And the most popular way that that has been tackled is with a tool like Jenkins. Jenkins is the most popular way that people have approached this problem. And so open source Jenkins is a great way to tackle this. For a single team who can spin up a Jenkins master and orchestrate a great deal of their audit requirements, of their deployment tasks. They can schedule build jobs, they can dispatch agents and monitor it and manage the results of that and have a really efficient workflow. And that works really well for a team that takes a development team kind of from, the dark ages of doing things by hand and into a modern software development world. And this is a great setup for a modern team that, can make a big difference and innovate more quickly, because they're now out of the weeds of, figuring out how to get their dev pipeline to work, or making sure that they are tracking all of the builds so they can get released properly, etc. The great thing about Jenkins is that it is open source and it's very popular, and there's a lot of support for it, and it's easy to get a team up and running like this. What happens is that because it works really well, this idea spreads, and the rest of the organization is going to start adopting this approach because it works. And one of two things usually happens. One, we end up with what we kind of jokingly call a Jenkinstein, a bit of a monster, because something that we created to solve a problem now becomes a challenge of its own, because all the other teams pile onto it. All the other teams in the company see this as working and want to run their jobs on it also. And now that original team becomes sort of accidental admins. This really is a manageability problem, because we end up with longer restart times for that server. There's more configuration to manage on that server, and it's a single point of failure for the whole organization. So while it's solving the problem that initially set out to solve, this architectural structure of having all of the teams depend on one Jenkins has more disadvantages than it's usually worth. And so we don't want to see an organization adopt Jenkins in this way, because there are risks involved, because it can end up slowing down the progress that they were seeing with Jenkins early on. The other path that some organizations take is to democratize Jenkins, to tell every team, spin up your own server, do your thing. And that addresses some of the concerns I had about a centralized Jenkins, because now I don't have to worry about conflicting configurations. Every team has their own configuration. I don't have to worry about a single point of failure, right? But we've created a different challenge now, and the challenge is on the other side of the coin. How do I standardize these? How do I ensure that we have the same security practices in place in all of these Jenkins masters? How do we coordinate, and how do we look for opportunities to reuse across all of these? If one idea is, solves a problem in one Jenkins master for one team, how do I make sure other teams can solve that problem again without reinventing it? I end up with more administration cost here, and I've got a lot of teams being admins, and I have a lot of inconsistency in the organization with how we're using Jenkins and how we're managing our software. And as we said, protecting this IP and protecting ourselves from risk, from security problems, from compliance violations, those are just as important as being able to innovate. So this isn't a great answer either. Even as well as it works for each one of those teams, it creates a problem for the organization. So because neither one of those growth paths leads to a happy ending, we at CloudBees created CloudBees Core, and that is what Core is designed to do. It is designed to help wrap our arms around, as an organization, all of those Jenkins masters, and give us central operation for that, to integrate with your existing role-based access control, to give you a plugin catalog that lets you manage which plugins go where and how different things are configured, and most importantly, puts less of that administration burden on each of those teams. It actually reduces that administration burden quite a bit by making onboarding of a new team very straightforward with templates and role-based access control, etc., and really turns that islands of Jenkins problem all over the organization into a win, because now the fact that every team has their own Jenkins master, that is, I get to take advantage of the flexibility of that and the scalability of that, but I don't have to make the trade-off of losing my centralized control, of losing a standardized security posture, of losing our ability to maintain compliance across the organization. So it lets me have the best of both worlds. Now, you might say, well, this sounds like I'm going to commit to a complicated infrastructure with Jenkins masters all over the place, and I'm going to have another thing to manage. And so that's why we pair this with VMware, and specifically with Enterprise PKS, because what that environment lets us do is easily scale and operate this in a Kubernetes environment in a way that doesn't create an additional overhead, that doesn't create a new administrative task. And so we get the power of what CloudBees Core is able to do, combined with what all the advantages that we had from Jenkins. And thanks to Enterprise PKS, we don't have to turn that into another administration burden, and we get all the elastic scalability and high availability of VMware and of Kubernetes. And so I'll pass it to Zhao, and he can explain to you really how that works and how that looks for you when you operate in this sort of combined environment. Zhao?
Hi. Okay, yeah, I just got unmuted. Thank you, Brian. Thanks for the great introduction. And yeah, so my name is Xiaohu Gao, and I am a technical marketing manager at VMware in the Cloud Native Application Business Unit. So my job is really just working with folks like Chris and companies, partners like CloudBees, to really help our customer be able to, help them on their journey to digitize their businesses through software, right? So as Chris mentioned, right? So what you see on this PowerPoint, I mean, sorry, not Chris, Brian mentioned, what you see on this PowerPoint is a very standard CI/CD workflow, right? So you have the CI portion where the developer pushes a code commit to a Git repo, and based on the push, a webhook is triggered to Jenkins to start a build job. And what Jenkins does is it checks out the latest commit from the Git repo, and including the Docker build file that's necessary to build a container, right? Run some automated tests for style, syntax, checks to make sure the security compliance is not validated. You're not putting passwords in your, hard coding passwords in your config and stuff like that, right? And builds a container image and push the final build, the image to the Harbor registry. I'm going to explain more about what Harbor does, right? So once the image is in Harbor registry, so Harbor registry is this enterprise-grade registry, a private registry that allows you to do scanning of images and signing of images. So you always know where the image is coming from, right? So Harbor would do the image scanning and make sure there's no vulnerabilities. So we checked image against the latest vulnerability databases, make sure that everything is clean, and we build the image and we signs it. And so if the container image passes the vulnerability scan, right, this is where the CD portion, the continuous delivery portion starts. So the Jenkins core is then going to basically take that image and push the newly created container images to like maybe a dev environment, right? And in this dev environment, you're probably going to run more additional tests. Then this is going to be more end-to-end tests, right? So you want an environment that's very, very close to what your production environment looks like. And so once you pass the test in dev environment, and so you can then promote this image to staging and eventually to production, leveraging the CloudBees continuous delivery pipeline capabilities, right? So what CloudBees Core and VMware PKS bring together, like what Brian mentioned, is this simplicity in management, and it allows you to solve a lot of the scaling challenges that Brian mentioned earlier, right? So the way we do that is basically elasticity, in your CI/CD platform, and then in taking advantage of the elasticity of the underlying infrastructure to deliver whatever capacity you need and to help you manage the both your CI/CD pipeline as well as the application. So with the CloudBees Core, you can provide your development team a production-ready enterprise CI/CD platform, right, within minutes, and then you can scale to meet the requirements of all your development teams without having to, build this Jenkins time that Brian mentioned earlier. So, and then with Enterprise PKS, you can leverage out-of-box tools, such as Wavefront that has, full visibility of your infrastructure and application performance, and you can use those visibility to scale your infrastructure resources or scale down your infrastructure resources to meet the demand of your application and of your CloudBees build process. So you basically, so what is, Brian, can you move to the next slide?
Yep.
Thank you. So what is VMware Enterprise PKS? So VMware Enterprise PKS leverages the open source CFCR as a way to deploy and manage highly available Kubernetes clusters on a cloud platform using BOSH. And BOSH is this another open source tool for release engineering, deployment, lifecycle management, and monitoring of distributed systems. And in the case of VMware Enterprise PKS, BOSH will deploy and manage and monitor the lifecycle of your Kubernetes cluster. So BOSH, what BOSH does is BOSH uses what we call the cloud provider interface, right, to provision your Kubernetes resources on top of your the infrastructure of your choice. So for on-premise workloads, right, BOSH will leverage the vSphere provider to provision the required Kubernetes resources on top of the SDDC infrastructure. And also BOSH has cloud provider interfaces for Google, AWS, and Azure. So it's truly multi-cloud capabilities with BOSH. And once BOSH deploys a VM that's needed for a cluster, what it will do is it will then deploy the upstream Kubernetes binaries on top of those virtualized infrastructure VMs, right? And as part of the cluster deployment, it will fully integrate with NSXT for container networking. So with NSXT, for those of you that are familiar with NSXT, it gives you the automatic layer 4 through 7 load balancing capability, just like what you get with the public clouds, right? On demand using the Kubernetes API, right? So define a service type of load balancer, we give you a load balancer on NSXT. And it fully integrates with security, right? So you can provide using Kubernetes native network policy profiles, right, to manage your communication between Kubernetes pods, all using standard upstream Kubernetes API and or kubectl. And also NSXT give you a complete set of operational tools that give you, allows you to troubleshoot, monitor your container environment exactly how you operate your virtualized VM environments today, right? So it's very powerful capabilities that you get with NSXT. Simplifies your networking even more, on top of Kubernetes. So you also get the integration with Harbor for enterprise-grade registry, right? So we talked about this earlier. Harbor gives you the ability to do image vulnerability, right? If you have a vulnerability if you're using some, upstream libraries that has vulnerability embedded in it, we can stop it from being served out into the infrastructure. And then, if a lot of the folks are leveraging what's already out there in the community, so you need to know where you're getting the stuff from, right? So that's critical. It's pretty critical for you to do image signing as well. And Harbor gives you all those capabilities. And finally, if you want to you have the option to fully integrate with your existing vRealize suite of products for login and application metric. So similar to how Kubernetes controllers monitors pods and make sure that the running state matches the expected state. So BOSH is also there to make sure that your cluster state is matching the desired state. So if a worker node is running suboptimally, BOSH will attempt to repair the worker node and bring the worker node back into a healthy status, right? So if you want to increase the overall capacity of your cluster, and BOSH is there to bring in, additional worker nodes to satisfy the need of your cluster for whatever application that the CloudBees is going to be deploying into the infrastructure. So with BOSH, you can scale your cluster both horizontally by adding more worker nodes, and vertically by increasing in the CPU and memory of your worker node. So, and then there's a link on the top of this slide, the little purple button, purple box, I guess, and you can watch more about what the capabilities of PKS is from that link. So, Brian, can you move to the next slide? So, who is the persona that the VMware Enterprise PKS are built for, right? So, primarily, what we see with our customers is there are 4 primary personas, right? So the first is VMware Enterprise PKS helps development teams, right? Leveraging CI/CD pipelines with CloudBees, you can configure and deploy your code to Kubernetes cluster on demand whenever that's required, right? So especially for a dev test environments, right? You can bring up Kubernetes cluster on as needed basis and turn them down when you don't need them. And the other main persona that we work with a lot is what we call the Kubernetes cluster operators. So those folks are, extremely familiar with the Kubernetes API and kubectl. And so they basically use PKS, CLI, and API to deploy clusters, and it automates everything around it, right? So the cluster operator basically leverages a pre-configured template that the VMware Enterprise PKS provides as a plan. And using that plan, you can deploy whatever type of cluster that you need to meet the need of your application, as well as your CloudBees, when you scale multiple teams, right? So the Kubernetes cluster operators are typically a member of your development teams, and they have a true understanding of the needs of the application. So, and then the third persona is what we call the PKS foundation operators, right? So, we use a lot of different terminology here, but think of a PKS foundation operator as your platform reliability engineers, right? For enterprise PKS, PRE for short. So their job is to basically, onboard PKS, deploy PKS on the virtual infrastructure, right? Ensure that the PKS platform is reliable, is stable, it has the ability to be audited, and has traceability, right? And make sure that if there's vulnerabilities or upgrades that needs to be done, right? The other ones that goes into the PKS and give you the latest version of Kubernetes for both the developers and the Kubernetes cluster operators, right? So they're the ones that sort of offering a service to the first two personas. And then typically the PKS foundation operator, they are very close to the vSphere administrators, because they have a vested interest in understanding the infrastructure. So for large enterprises where PKS is deployed, typically this person, the PREs or the PKS foundation operators, are part of the IT central IT department, and they could be a cloud admin or could be a vSphere admin. That they're usually very familiar with the topology itself. Brian, next slide, please. So most of you know VMware as a company that has led the industry on infrastructure virtualization through SDDC. SDDC stands for Software Defined Data Center. And we will argue that the next transformation our joint customers is going to make is to become a software-defined enterprise, like what Brian mentioned earlier. So they are going to know that they have successfully navigated that journey when they're operating across multiple clouds, on-premise, and in the public cloud. And when they are using, policies and control and reporting across all their environments, right? It's seamless to them. So VMware Enterprise Portfolio is designed to help enterprises run their application anywhere by offering the right tools based on experience, ability, and business needs. So VMware Enterprise PKS, is the product we're talking about today, is a turnkey solution that bundles all the tools you need to deploy, operate, and monitor your Kubernetes cluster. So once you deploy Enterprise PKS, pretty much all the tools you need for your data management is already fully integrated. So you don't really have to do anything on top of it. So you get full logging with vRealize log insight. We get Wavefront for metrics and troubleshooting for your applications, right? So all that stuff is there. And for customers that has specific workload requirements, for example, if you have a big data type of workload that works best on bare metal servers, for example, right? Or you have a network requirement that requires specialized plugins that give you the lowest latency or some extremely type high throughput. So this is where Essential PKS helps. And another use case that a lot of our customers choose Essential PKS is, they already have internal expertise in building Kubernetes, but they want assistance in aligning with upstream, meaning like, they want to make sure that whatever they're doing is something that's aligning with what the industries are going, right? So with the assistance of, or maybe, they want to expand what they already offer to other lines of businesses, so to, in their company, right? And they're not sure the best way to scale their Kubernetes deployment. So with the assistance of, VMware architectural design team, right, we help them expand their Kubernetes offering. And this is another, case we see a lot of people use Essential PKS. With Essential, basically it's a modular approach to Kubernetes. It basically allows you to pick integration points that best match your application and business requirements. And so basically, we also offer architecture consulting teams to help you. Essential PKS is really designed to meet with the customer needs on where they are at, right? Rather than enterprise PKS, which is a turnkey solution. So, and finally, the last offering is the cloud PKS. So for people who just want Kubernetes and want someone else to handle the infrastructure, the monitoring or the lifecycle of your Kubernetes cluster, right? So we have the cloud PKS. The cloud PKS it's a SaaS offering, and the VMware basically manages everything at and below the Kubernetes cluster. So all you have to worry about is writing your apps, leverage CloudBees Core to sort of carry your to implement CI/CD processes that best meets your organizational alignment, right? So regardless which workloads wherever your workload reside, VMware's goal is to give you the same set of tools, so you have the same set of visibility and access policy across all environments, right? And throughout VMware, all of our BUs are working hard to integrate solutions that works with the best industry has to offer. And as I mentioned earlier, we offer application mesh with Wavefront. We recently announced the NSX Service Mesh offering, a beta Service Mesh offering with NSX Service Mesh, and the backup and restore capability for business continuity using Valero for your stateful workloads in Kubernetes, right? So, and we're working on a whole bunch of new stuff to simplify our customer journey to become this software-defined enterprise. And then I'm going to pass back to Brian to talk about why this relationship are better together and what are some of the value propositions they expect to see.
Yeah, thanks, Xiao. I think this is a really good combination, and that's what I think is really exciting about it. As we said when we opened, we need to treat our software operation like a critical business asset. And so we need to approach it with the same rigor and the same sort of professional quality and enterprise scale that we would any other critical business asset. And that means we need a robust and reliable place to build, test, release, deliver software. And the combination of managed Jenkins using CloudBees Core, meaning that things don't get updated in Jenkins without centralized control, meaning that we have the same security policy for all of them. We're able to scale them horizontally without administrative burden. Combining that with the high availability and redundancy of a Kubernetes cluster running an enterprise PKS means that we can actually scale our development infrastructure to be just as reliable as we would consider our production infrastructure. And we should expect that same quality and that same reliability out of our development infrastructure. Because we're using VMware, it obviously can scale to production levels if needed, because this is an enterprise grade platform. And because it integrates so well with an existing VMware installation, you're able to take advantage of the energy and quality of your existing VMware footprint. We're also able to be compliant and secure in a way that isn't possible without this combination. And that means we can maintain the compliance and security of our source code system, thanks to CloudBees Core, making sure that we apply the same security policies and the same audit policies and the same compliance policies across all of our Jenkins masters. and using role-based access control to control who can access what piece of source code and maintain audit logs for all of that access. And you combine that with the managed security of a VMware environment, and that means that we can maintain security of this entire operation in the way that you would any other critical business asset. And of course, this is not only scalable, meaning that it can get large, but also scalable in that it's dynamic. We take advantage of PKS's ability and really the Bosch system's ability to automatically scale your Kubernetes footprint up and down for you as your development requirements change. And that means you get to take advantage of the elastic scale that is possible in this type of infrastructure, but you get to do that in a way that you still manage and control in whatever VMware environment, whatever situation you have, whether it's in, your own environment, whether it's in a cloud like Google Cloud, you have the control of that. And so you get to control your scaling costs and manage that all together. And so there's a combination of value here that these two things bring together that we think makes this an especially powerful combination. It's definitely a 1 + 1 = 5 kind of math. Bringing these two pieces together means that we get our developers back to delivering value, and it means we can deliver value more quickly. We're not going to go spend months trying to put together a scaled development environment. Enterprise PKS lets you get up and running very quickly without a huge learning curve on Kubernetes, really any at all. And CloudBees Core means we can wrangle all those Jenkins masters together and make it very easy to spin up new dev teams, put together new projects, start new application work. And it means that all of that interesting innovation and creativity and value that our developers are creating is getting to customers more quickly, because we're not spending that time trying to get it there. We're spending that time on the innovation. We get a lot of operational efficiency out of this. We don't have to deploy yet another architecture, yet another infrastructure. We've worked in VMware, we have VMware footprint, we're using the same familiar VMware that we know and love. We can use the same VMware installation if we want, but we don't have to relearn that. Our teams don't have to relearn or have to learn from scratch how to do Kubernetes. We don't have to relearn Jenkins, it's the same Jenkins we're familiar with. So there's a lot of learning curve reduction in this approach. And we get the operational efficiency of CloudBees Core, of not having to administer a bunch of Jenkins masters all over the company. We get the operational efficiency of the way Enterprise PKS manages Kubernetes for us without creating a new admin burden there. And we get the operational efficiency of centralized security, of how role-based access control can help us deal with maintaining proper access as people and organizations and bits and pieces move around. That's just a whole list of things we don't have to administer anymore. And finally, I think, the thing that is at the end of the day going to be the most important is that we put our developers back in the innovation seat. We sit them back down without a server under their desk that they have to babysit, without tools they have to build and maintain from scratch, without spending their time trying to figure out how to get a new hosting environment up and running for this new thing they're trying to create. We put them back in their innovation seat with their thinking hat on, and they go solve interesting problems that help our business win, because that's what we really want them to be doing with their time. So it shifts their effort back to the thing that drives value for the company. And that really is how we're going to win with software, and how software is going to be our competitive advantage, right? So that's what we think is so interesting about this, is that when you run CloudBees Core in Enterprise PKS, you're able to deliver on that promise of what software development is supposed to be, where it really makes a difference for the business, because we sort of take all administration burden, so much of the administration burden out of the mix, and shift our energy to the thing that we can do as a company that really makes us competitive and that matters. So I hope that it's been very clear that these two things really work really well together, and that we're really excited about the combination. We have more information available for you. There is, and these links will be in the chat, and they're also, you guys will get this sent out to you afterward. So you can go and read it immediately, and you'll also get the follow-up to help you get more information. But there is documentation and a quick start guide on this. There's also more information on the VMware Solution Exchange with more tech details. And then in person, coming up in August, both the CloudBees hosted DevOps World Jenkins World and the VMware hosted VM World are both opportunities for you to in person talk to people, to ask experts, bring your questions, talk through your scenario, and get even more hands-on information and workshops where you can really dig in with this. Our hope is that this is a combination of advantages and features that really helps you win in your business, and that's our end goal. So we're open for questions. Please feel free to drop them into the chat and we'll make sure we can answer them if you have any. Thank you very much for joining us, by the way. I want to remind you, we have David and Zhao here both who are quite technical and can answer detailed questions, so don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Thank you, Zhao, for the great presentation and information. We did have a number of questions come in. Zhao, we're going to hand those over to you shortly. I'll start with one of the questions I have open now. It's one that I could speak on for quite a while. It's what is the difference between Jenkins and CloudBees? I'll make this a little more specific and say, what is the difference between Jenkins and CloudBees Core? And the reason for that is because CloudBees does more than just Jenkins. If you're following the news, just in the last few months, we've acquired 3 companies. Those are CodeShip, Electric Cloud, and Rollout.io. So we're super excited about new features and new products in our portfolio. But for a very long time, we've been focused on Jenkins, and of course still are. And there's a number of differences between Jenkins and CloudBees Core. As you saw in the feature overview diagram, and if you were paying close attention to Brian, we see often in the field people using bad patterns with Jenkins, running a single Jenkins master, of course, becoming what we call the Franken Jenkins, and know for sure that a good pattern is to split them up, use them team by team. And this is one of the fundamental differences of CloudBees Core, is how it enables multiple teams to use Jenkins, how it enables Jenkins to scale more rapidly, especially on a Kubernetes platform like PKS. And it does a number of things, not only for the administrators, but for developers too. If developers need to get up to speed quickly, they can implement templates, which are learned over time via best practices being combined together, so developers can get up to speed very quickly. And if they're building microservices, they can leverage event triggers, which are very neat, and enable cross-team collaboration so that pipelines can publish events that can be received by other teams, allowing for greater levels of automation. And then, of course, the operations center component really ties the room together for Big Lebowski fans out there, and helps to manage a large-scale fleet of Jenkins servers, which is, of course, necessary when you use Jenkins across an enterprise. So it really does make the administration and operation of the platform much smoother and helps it to scale. Zhao, do you have a question on your end you'd like to address?
Yeah, so there was a question in the chat. It asked about how does the acquisition of Heptio and HKS play together with VMware Enterprise PKS, or does it play at all, right? So that's a great question, and so I answer that from a portfolio level, and then I'm going to go down to a very specific to an Enterprise PKS, right? So at a portfolio level, yeah. So I think of Essential PKS as this the offering that basically takes advantage of the modular approach of the Heptio offering from the past, right? And also we have a part of the Essential is about architectural designs and architectures and recommended validated solutions, right? So all that is part of the Essential, along with some of the open source tools that we're building for the community, like Valero, Sonoboy, and Contour, and a bunch more. So basically, all that is going to be consumable and essential, and then specific to enterprise. So a lot of those business continuity tools, right? You can deploy that in enterprise PKS. It should just work, right? So you should be able to leverage Valero to back up your enterprise PKS. Now, obviously, you need to leverage more of a sort of the snapshotting of the application is a little bit different. So you have to more use a RESTIC adapter instead of like your cloud provider adapter for it. So a lot of those tools that we have from Heptio should also work with the enterprise PKS.
Thanks, Joe. Good answer there. I'll take another question. And I like this one. Someone asked, can CloudBees Core be considered a full PaaS? PaaS meaning platform as a service. And I like this one because CloudBees Core does effectively turn a whole fleet of Jenkins servers into a platform. So you can think of it like a platform for sure. But I wouldn't call it a PaaS per se. I actually think of CloudBees Core more like a SaaS, a software as a service. However, most software as a services operate on someone else's infrastructure. That's one of the advantages, really. And CloudBees CodeShip is available if you're interested in not managing infrastructure. But if you want to do CI/CD on-premise or in your own environment, public cloud, wherever, CloudBees Core is very useful for that. And it provides a SaaS in the sense that when you deploy it on PKS, the only component that runs out of the box is Operations Center. And then you can set up your role-based access controls for all your teams and even allow the teams to provision Jenkins servers as needed. Now, this is more often done by an administrator, but it's like having Jenkins software as a service in that you can deploy Jenkins servers very, very quickly and easily, like you would in a true SaaS environment. Now, not only with Jenkins masters, also agents are provisioned easier than ever inside of PKS as pods, and then developers orchestrate their CI/CD steps using the containers that are within the Kubernetes pods and executing steps on maybe one or a handful of containers until their CI/CD flow is complete. So that's my thought on CloudBees Core being a PaaS, but I hope that brought some clarity to the question. I'll take one more question. Someone asked, how do shared agents work in Kubernetes? And I think it's a good question, especially coming off the last one, having mentioned that agents are launched on demand to orchestrate CI/CD steps. And in a Kubernetes environment, agents aren't like you might be used to, where you go find a virtual machine somewhere and plug it into your Jenkins server. Instead, all your agents, again, run inside of Kubernetes. And the way that we share those at CloudBees is by sharing the template that's used to define the agent. So in the world of Kubernetes, you use Docker files to describe the containers that you're going to use in your process. And then with CloudBees, we take the definition of the agent and store that in Operations Center, or allow you to store it in Operations Center, so that all the teams using all the managed masters can take advantage of that agent template and have those tools available to them very quickly without having to worry about configuring the agent themselves.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, everyone, thank you for joining in today. Afterwards, I will be working on getting everyone the recording, the links that Brian spoke about earlier, and the presentation too. So thank you so much for joining in today. Zhao, thank you for also being a part of this presentation. I hope everyone has a good day and see you soon. Thanks everyone for presenting.
Thanks, Taleva. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thanks everyone.